Hello everyone, welcome back, and in this video we are going to learn about the optics of vision. And this physical principles of light is very important to understand the physiology of vision. That is because the eye behaves as a camera, as an optical system, and how does the light rays comes to focus in retina and how the image is formed on retina is very important to understand. So to understand the neurophysiology of vision, we have to understand the optics of vision or the basic principles of light. So let us get started. We'll be dealing this topic under two basic headings, that is the physical principles of optics and the optics of eye. So in physical principles of optics, we are going to see about the refraction of light, various physical principles involved in the refraction of light, then the focal length of lens, formation of an image by the convex lens, and refractive power, which is measured in diopter. Then we'll go to the optics of eye, in which we will see what is the reduced eye, formation of an image in retina, what is accommodation, what is the mechanism of accommodation, the pupillary diameter, and at last errors of refraction. So what is refraction of light? When the light travels in air, which is a lighter medium, to a denser medium, or when it travels from any one medium to another medium which is different in density, what is going to happen is the speed of the light is going to change. So as it goes from the air to the glass, which is denser medium, the speed of the light is decreasing. And in other case, if the surface to which the light is forming interface, or the interface between the two mediums is angulated, rather perpendicular. If it is not perpendicular but it is angulated, the light will also bend. So these all principles will be very important to understand, and this comes under the refraction of light, these principles will help us to understand how the eye, the lens of the eye, or in the interface of air and to the eye is helping to form the image on the retina. So let us start with refractive index, and the way to look at refractive index is it's an index of how the medium will behave with the light. So if you see the basic of refractive index, it is the ratio of velocity of light when it is traveling in the air to the velocity of light when it is traveling in that substance. So refractive index will give the index about that substance as compared to how light was in the air. So at air, the velocity of light is around 300,000 kilometers per second. If light travels through a particular type of glass, this is like if we imagine that the light is traveling through a particular type of glass at a velocity of 200,000 kilometers per second. In that case, refractive index will be, by keeping it in the formula, that is ratio of velocity of light in air to the velocity of light in the substance. So in case of air, the velocity is 300,000 divided by 200,000 in that substance, and that gives us the refractive index of 1.50. So this means that the refractive index of 1.50 means the light will be traveling slower in this medium, in the substance. If the refractive index goes up, as to say to 2.5, we can imagine that the speed of the light will be much slower than in the air. So this is how the refractive index can be looked at, and it is an index, so to say, how that substance or how that medium is going to behave with the light. In the previous slide, we discussed about the velocity of light and how the two different mediums behave if the angle at which the light is falling in the different medium is at perpendicular. So the light is traveling in this direction and the angle of interface is exactly perpendicular to the direction of light. But what happens if the interface is angulated. In the previous case we have seen that only if the interface is perpendicular, the speed of the light will decrease, the velocity of the light will decrease, as you can see by the wave fronts. These are the wave fronts, and the distance between the wave front is more here. When it is traveling in the air, the light is faster, but when it is traveling in the denser medium with a higher refractive index, the wave front are closer, telling us that the velocity of the light has decreased. But still, if in this case the interface was perpendicular and there is no change of direction of the flow of light, but in this case the refraction of light rays at an interface which is angulated, as you can see here. So what is happening when the light is falling at an angulated interface? As you can see here that it bends, it is bending to a certain direction which is perpendicular or towards the direction of the angulated surface, near to the perpendicular direction of angulated surface. Now the degree to which the bending of the light will take place will depend on two factors. The first factor is the refractive index, the difference in the refractive index. So let us say if the light is traveling in air and then it goes to a refractive index of 1.5, then that is one factor which influences the bending of light. The second factor is the angle at which the interface is formed. So these are the two factors which will tell or which will govern how much the bending of the light will be there. And if the refractive index is more, the bending will be more. If the angle is more, the bending will be more. Now we are going to apply those principles of refraction what we have studied and study about the lenses. So why to study about lenses is, as we know that our eye has a lens, and even when there is refractive errors we use lenses to correct those errors. So it is important to understand, to learn about the lenses, how lenses behave with light. Let us start with the convex lens. So if you look at the convex lens, the surface is biconvex, and one thing what we have to remember about the convex lens is convex lens converges the light. Convex converge. Okay, so as you can see here, the light ray which is passing through the center of the lens will go uninterrupted, whereas if you go above, these rays are falling on angulated surface. The refractive index is constant. Refractive index is not changing, but the angle at which the light rays are falling on the lens is changing. As you can see, the angle is increasing here. So because of that, the amount of deviation of the light rays or bending of the light rays will be consecutively more when the angle is increasing. Same here, when you go towards the bottom, the angle is increasing, so the bending of light is increasing. And as you can see, all the light rays converge at one point which is called the focal point. All the rays will be converging to the focal point only if the curvature of the lens is proper. And one more thing to notice here is that the deviation or the bending of light, half is done when the light enters from the air to the lens, and half is done when the light is coming from the lens to the air, back to the air or another medium. So this is how the bending of light is done in both the interface. Coming to the second type of lens is concave lens. And the thing to remember about concave lens is concave lens diverges the light rays. As you can see, if we interpret this lens similarly, the light ray which is passing through the center of the lens will go uninterrupted, will not bend or will not deviate, whereas the light rays which are consecutively falling on the lens on the angulated surface, they tends to bend away from the midline. As you can see, they tend to bend away from the midline, and that is the property of divergence. Half of the bending of light will be done at this interface, and half of the bending of light will be done when the light is going out of the lens back to the air or out of lens to any other medium, depends on the difference in the refractive index. So this is how the concave lens is diverging the light rays. As you can see here, the focal point cannot be formed behind the lens because the light rays are diverging. So the concave and convex lens, what we have discussed in the previous slides, can be arranged in two different ways and we can get two different type of lenses. As you can see here, this one is a cylindrical lens and this one is in spherical lens. What is the difference between spherical lens and cylindrical lens? First, when we see the cylindrical lens, what is happening here is it is converging the light from the sides. As you can see, the light which are falling on the sides are converged on the single point. And if we consider the light which is falling up and down, if we consider this as the center point, and if we consider that the light which are falling up and down are being converged on a different point, that is what the cylindrical lens does. It focuses the light rays in a line. As you can see here, the light rays which are coming parallelly from the distant source is getting focused in a line, whereas in case of spherical lens, it focuses the light rays which are coming from all the planes to a single point. In the case of cylindrical lens, the lights in the single plane is getting focused at a particular point, making the line. But in case of spherical lens, the light coming from different planes, the light coming from different planes are getting focused at a single point, the focal point. So this is the difference between cylindrical and spherical lens. The understanding of cylindrical and spherical lens is important because in case of a particular refractive error which is known as astigmatism, this cylindrical lens is the one which is used, because in astigmatism what is happening is there is a refractive error in a particular plane, and to correct that refractive error of a particular plane, the cylindrical lens has to be used. So that is why it is very important to understand the concept of cylindrical and spherical lenses. Coming to the next aspect is focal length of a lens. So let us say this is a concave lens and the light rays are coming from the distant source. When we talk about the focal length, one thing we have to say is the light source is always a distant source and the parallel light rays. So focal length can be defined in terms of parallel light rays only. So when the lens is there and parallel light rays are coming from a distant source and they fall on lens and converges on a focal point. So the distance between the middle of the midpoint of the lens to the focal point will be called as the focal length of that particular lens. So for this particular lens, if we consider for this particular lens, the focal length would be at this point. So this is how we define the focal length. When the parallel rays fall on the lens and they converge on the focal point, the distance between the midpoint of the lens and the focus point is called as the focal length of the lens. Now this diagram is particularly important so that we can understand the mechanism or at least the principle of accommodation when we see about the lens. So what is happening here is, in the first diagram here we spoke about the parallel light rays, but if the source of light or the point source is near to the lens, the light rays will not be parallel, the light rays will be diverging. So this diverging light rays will then be passing through the lens and will converge on a different point. As you can see, the point is farther than the focal point. These two are the same lenses, but for the different location of the light source, the focal point is different. So in this case, what is happening, if the point source is near, the focal point is more beyond the lens. So how to calculate the actual focal length of the lens? For that, if you want to calculate the actual focal length of the lens, you can use this formula. 1 by f is equal to 1 by a plus 1 by b. What is 1 by f? F is the focal length, a is the distance from the point source to the lens, and b is the distance from the lens to the focal point. So this will give the focal length of the lens, and the focal length for these two lenses, the same lenses, will be same even though the point source is nearer and the focal point is farther as compared to the different light source. The focal length will be constant for these two lens because the curvature of the lens is same. But if we consider this as the lens of the eye, if we consider this as the lens of the eye, it has to focus the image on the retina, which is at a fixed distance. In that case, how the eye can focus the image at the constant distance? So to understand that, we have to understand the third diagram. As you can see here, if the lens of the eye is not flexible, if it is not changing its shape, if the object comes near to the eye, near to the lens, the image will be formed farther and it will not be at focus in the retina. So to have a clearer picture of that near image, which is near to the lens, what happens in the eye is the curvature of the lens changes, which then brings, as you can see, this lens is having higher curvature, which then brings the focus point at the same distance. As you can see here, the focal point is at the same distance, and thus the image can be seen clearly and it can be focused in the retina. So this is the mechanism behind accommodation power of the eye. How does it do that? It changes the curvature of the lens so that the light is focused on that same point in the retina, so to have a clearer image. So this is how the accommodation takes place in our eye. Now let us look at the formation of image by the convex lens. So as we can see here, this is a object. If this A is the object, what will happen is this object can be considered as various point sources, different point sources, and if the light is coming from the top of the object, it is traveling, the light rays which are arising from the top of the object is traveling through the lens and coming to the focus at this point. As you can see, if the light rays which are falling at various angles will be focusing at this point, and the light rays which are coming from the bottom of the object, the point source, the point of the lights or the source of the light which is at the bottom of the object, the light which are coming from the bottom of the object will be focused here on the top. So we will get an inverted image by the convex lens. For example, if we see this person, if the light rays are passing through the lens, they will be the one which are coming from the top will be focused on the bottom, and the one which is coming from the bottom will be focused on the top, and same happens on the lateral sides of the image also, they also will be reversed. So this is how the image is formed in our retina, and that will be sent to the brain, and the brain is then trained to interpret it as an erect image or to see it as an erect image. So this is how the image is formed actually in the retina, but by interpretation of the brain we can see it as an erect image. So that is the important thing to understand about the formation of an image by the convex lens. Coming to the topic of refractive power of a lens. This is important in terms of when we correct the refractive errors. Let us say we will ask some of our friends what is the power of your spectacles. In that case, what is the power is the diopter or the refractive power of the lens, which is mentioned in diopter. So more the refractive power of the lens, more is the diopter. And how to define the refractive power or diopter is, it is the 1 meter divided by the focal length of the lens. So if a lens, let us say this lens is having a focal length of 1 meter, so 1 meter divided by 1 meter, it will become 1 diopter. If we consider this lens, if it has a focal length of 0.5 meters or 50 centimeter, so 1 divided by 0.5, it will have the diopter of 2. That means the refractive power of this lens is having 2 diopters. If the lens has the focal length of 10 centimeter, in this case if the length is 10 centimeter, so 1 meter divided by 10 centimeter is 10. So this will have the focal length of, this will have the refractive power of 10 diopters. As you can see, more the diopter, more is the refractive power, and it can focus the image nearer to the lens. So this is how we can understand about the diopter. More the diopter, shorter the focal length of the lens. And one more thing to consider, that in case of concave lens, as we have seen earlier, that concave lens diverges the light rays. So this cannot be understood. The focal length cannot be found for the concave lens. In that case, the lens which diverges the light rays equal to the lens which converges the light rays of 1 diopter will have a power of minus 1 diopter. That means if we place a concave lens in front of a convex lens, they will neutralize each other and they will have no bending of light rays. In that case, they will be said that the concave lens is of same diopter of the convex lens. So that finishes the principles of refraction with respect to the physiology of our vision. In the next class, we are going to do the optics of the eye. That means we will see what specific features are there in the eye and what we have to consider in the optics specific to the eye, and especially we will do the errors of refraction and correction of them. Thank you so much for watching.